All right. So this morning we are doing a Buyer 101 class, and we're going to touch on the fundamentals of what does it look like to work with a buyer and how do you prepare yourself to be a buyer's agent. There is certainly a lot of information to be shared, and I'm going to try my best to make this interactive with you and give you some tools that I use. There are entire classes, 3 and 6 hour continuing education classes on this. So as you can imagine, we can't go too deep into that when we're just spending a few minutes here. But what I want to do is make sure that I give you enough information that you feel really comfortable meeting with the buyer and walking them through the first steps, and then knowing what's next once you get under contract, because those things are going to be really important for you to convey in a confident manner to any buyer that you're willing to work with. So to start, one of the things that I want to do is really help with sharing some of the tools that I use to walk you through the steps. We're not talking about the lead generation or lead conversion today. So I'm going to assume at this point that maybe you already have a buyer that you are in contact with. How they came to you is irrelevant to this conversation. But what I want to do is make sure that I can share my screen and walk you through what it looks like for the beginning stages. And to me, I'm going to break this down into a few different steps. The first one is leading your client. How do you help them with making decisions and understanding what goes into it? The second one is guiding them, making sure that you're giving them the advice they need or bringing to their awareness things that they need to know to make critical decisions. And the third is just protecting them, and that's going to stand firm when you really write not only a good contract, but when you are able to hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that commonly happen in real estate. So the first step is going to be about leading them. And that really starts with understanding. To me, you cannot lead someone if you have no idea what they want or need. And so I start with step one, which is the consultation. And to me, that's one of the most important things we can do is take time up front to discuss with them what are their expectations, what are their wants, what is the timeline, how do they prefer to be communicated with, all of these things that make a great experience for them when we're able to understand who they are and what they want. And so hopefully you can see this screen that I've shared, which is the buyer consultation. This particular form I developed many years ago, and it's something that I continue to redesign or add to or subtract from as I need to. It is 2 pages, but you can see when I have this intake form in front of me, it's going to walk me through a lot of the basic questions that I may need to have when I'm doing a consult with a buyer. And so the first step is just getting contact information here, being able to see who they are, how many people might be in the move. If they've got kids, sometimes I'll ask about pets as well. And then I go into the general questions about how did you hear about me if I don't know where the lead came from. When is the best way and time to communicate with you? Because that becomes a really important thing. If you've got someone who works special hours, such as maybe they work the night shift, or maybe they work in a hospital where they're on a 12-hour shift for a day and you can't reach them when they're on shift. Those are things you want to know up front when you're having that consult, because it will affect how you set up showings and schedule things. It will also affect how you communicate during the transaction. And then, of course, we want to know, when do they want to be in the home? And that's a really important component as well. If they're several months out, that's a great thing because it actually can help you prepare them better. But if they say, hey, my lease is coming due at the end of the month and I need to be in something now, there's a lot of work to be done without any real time to do the preparation needed. So it's going to be a jump into action immediately and try and get as much done as possible within the next few days. And so understanding their timeline is going to be really critical to how you guide them through the next steps. And then, of course, what are they looking for in a home? Because that's also going to be important. The big thing I will encourage you to do when you're working with a buyer is to not just listen for what they say, but to ask probing questions about what they really mean. Because what they say and what they mean can be two different things. And I have learned this over the years. It's not intentional, but many people start off with, oh, I need 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and, a large backyard, and and this and this and this and this. And they'll give me the list of things that they have been typically using to search for homes. And so I'll sometimes ask the deeper questions of, okay, so why do you need 4 bedrooms? Who is going to be occupying the home, or what are you using those rooms for? And the reason for that is that we've had so many shifts in how people use their homes. And as you know, there may be someone who's looking for a workout room. Maybe they need a hobby room. Maybe they need a home office. And if one of those is what they're looking to use one of those bedrooms for, we have the option in our MLS to set up a search differently that provides them more results than they would have gotten had we just taken their order and been one of those agents who just does what the client is telling them to do, rather than leading them through the process of finding the inventory that might be a better fit. We can search for a den, we can search for a loft, we can search for a bonus room that would satisfy what they need the home to do for them without compromising the search results. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I'm gonna jump into how to do a search, but I want to walk you through this consultation, and I'll send you this form when we're done so that you have it. And that way you can look through it, get familiar with it, and then more of it that you memorize or get comfortable asking on the phone, the better, because you may not always have this form with you when you get that call. You may be driving down the road and someone's calling. And so you need to be able to roll through several of these questions and get a really good idea of who they are, how they like to work, and what they're looking for in a home without needing a complete checklist. I'm going to scroll down to the other page just so you can see what it looks like. It again continues with financing, which is the next big step in helping lead them through the process. What they don't understand is that it does no good to go look for homes until they actually can confirm that they're able to buy that home or make an offer on that home. And most people are ready and willing to jump into home searching without going through the process of getting pre-qualified. There are some major problems with that. And as a broker, I want to protect you and lead you and guide you as well. And so I'm going to give you some reasons why that shouldn't be the way that it's done so that you can hopefully effectively communicate that to the client. The first is that we need that pre-qualification to verify their identity. Identity theft is rampant, and safety in our industry needs to be a priority. And so one of the best ways that you can ensure you know who you're working with and meeting at a vacant home for a showing is to have them pre-qualify with a lender who has now taken their identity information. By the time that lender runs any credit check or whatever, we already have some information on that person, which is really good for safety reasons. Secondly, we want to make sure that they are willing to follow process, because if they want to direct and tell us how to do our job rather than listen and allow us to guide them through the process, that might be a red flag. It may be that it's not the kind of client you want to work with. And so maybe you say, look, this is how we do things because there is a process that has to happen for the safety and for the benefit of everyone. And truthfully, our contract determines and states that we are working in good faith. And we cannot be working in good faith if we have not done the steps that are necessary. In addition, in our contract, it also says an Arizona Association of Realtors pre-qualification form, an AAR pre-qual is the short acronym for it, is hereto attached. And so if we're not attaching that pre-qualification form or proof of funds to the contract, we are in direct violation of the contract the moment we go to make an offer. Third, we don't want to waste our time or their time, because homes move off the market fairly quickly. If it takes them 4 days or 6 days to get their documents to the lender and get pre-qualified, the homes they're looking at yesterday may be gone. And so we're starting over from scratch, and we've just wasted a lot of time with showings on properties that they couldn't make an offer on in the time they needed to. So having that pre-qualification not only determines how much they're able to qualify for, which is helpful to everybody to make sure we're on the same page, it also allows you to guide them if there are multiple offers. Maybe there's someone who's offered above list price. You can now have the conversation with them that, you're only pre-qualified up to this amount, which was the list price. we no longer have the ability to compete effectively against other offers that are much higher. And so it helps with having the conversation with clients so that they have realistic expectations when they are going out to search for a home. The other thing that they don't realize and need to go through the pre-qualification process for is that there's more than just the loan and maybe the interest rate. And so for those that have gone online and maybe plugged in their income and had some website say, hey, you're qualified for this amount, and at today's interest rate, that means you're effectively able to buy this amount of home. The challenge with that is that they're not typically including things like homeowners insurance, taxes, HOA fees, and other things that we know may eat into their home budget. And so we have to have that conversation through the first part of the process to lead them to the understanding that there's more to consider than what they may know about. And that's part of the way that we protect them as well, is that we educate the consumer on what it looks like to have the entire cost of home ownership considered. So that's the first part with the consultation. And that generally can take anywhere from 10, 15 minutes for someone who's quick and easy to work with, or it can take 30 minutes to an hour with someone who may have a lot of questions or who you may have to explain different pieces of this to. But this consultation form is really designed to help walk you through a conversation to understand who they are and what they want. All good on that? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So in the first call, I won't, in other words, we won't show houses until they read this and we go through this consultation and probably they agree on and
Right. Yeah. We want to guide them through this process, and we can't do that if we jump right into showing homes blindly. If we don't know what they want or need, and we don't know what they're qualified to buy,
Mhm.
we're all just wasting time, and it's not helpful to the consumer. And unfortunately, there are a lot of agents that I will say have not been trained appropriately, or maybe not as professional. And that is exactly what they do. Someone calls them and says, hey, I found this house online, I want to see it. They'll jump in their car and go show the house
That is
without
exactly.
doing any of the work. And unfortunately, I think it's a disservice to the consumer, because it not only teaches them that we're at their beck and call, which is not the
Uh-huh.
case when we're professionals, but it also teaches them that they don't really have to do anything to prepare to buy a home. And that's not true. We need to set the expectation that there is a lot of work to buying a home, and we're happy to walk them through it. But to set up a showing appointment and ask a seller to leave their home and open it up to liability just because someone on a whim feels like seeing it isn't professional. And so we want to raise the bar there.
Yes, that happened. The first person that
Yeah.
remember I told you she was looking for a house and she said, oh, I'm gonna wait. Well, she saw some houses on Zillow
Yep.
and she called this agent and this agent took her and showed the house and right
Sure.
there she signed with him because
Yep.
he offered to go through the pre-approval and all that. So
Mhm.
I practically lost her
Yeah.
because she went with somebody else.
Yeah. And that's okay. I'm one of those that many times I have done a one and done freebie. And I'll tell them that I'm happy to meet you and show you a home as a free first look. But
Mhm.
ultimately, if you want a professional realtor to guide you through the process, we need to take a step back, go through the consultation, and help all of us get on the same page, because we've got to form a team of experts and we've got to help you make the best decision possible. And we can't possibly do that if we don't understand what you're looking for, or why you want to move, or when you need to be in a home. So most of them understand that when we put it in that context, that our job isn't to just open doors and fly blindly through the process, but it's to help guide them and protect them. And that means we need to do some things in order. They get it. It's like, a client or a patient calling a doctor and saying, I need a surgery for this. And the doctor's not even examined the patient. That would just be ridiculous, right?
Yes.
There's a process that has to be followed before you schedule a surgery and go in. and there's a reason for it. And so we have the same responsibility to educate the public that there are a lot of people involved in the transaction, between our lenders, our title and escrow, possibly home inspectors, appraisers, other ancillary services. And we don't want to waste everybody's time by getting under contract only to find out we can't perform. That's a nightmare for everybody. So, and unfortunately, it's very costly for the buyer as well. So we want to protect them by making sure that we do walk them through that process. The next part of this is guiding. And I want to talk to you through this very, very quickly, but the ultimate part about guiding is helping educate them in a way that they understand what's happening. This is a page out of our buyer's guide that we have. And so our office offers these guides to you to use with your clients. And I recommend that you give them out, whether it's the printed copy or you're sending a digital image. But what we want to do is make sure that we're helping our clients understand the process and have a reference point. So this is something they can refer back to over and over again if they have questions about what does it look like. And so I will often refer to this and say, if you'll remember in your buyer's guide under the steps to buying a home, we now are in the process where we're touring homes, but the next step is going to be to decide which one you want to make an offer on and for us to negotiate that offer with the listing agent. And so we can refer back to this and help them kind of get a clear understanding of where they are. Sorry. So this is a great, just a great image of what it looks like to walk through the process. And then as you can see on the consultation page, I've also set up what does it look like to do a consultation, and it's made up of several components, most of which are covered in that sheet that we just went through before. This piece, as we guide them through the process, is going to continue till the very end. So once we get them under contract, we're going to guide them through what does it look like to hire a home inspector. And maybe we are going to provide references or recommendations for other inspection services if there's specialties, or maybe for repairs to be done, we're going to recommend certain contractors. So those are all part of how we guide the client through the process. Yeah.
I have a question. When you said the home inspector, so who called the home inspector? We do, or they have to do it, or?
Yeah, good question. So typically we want the client to call and schedule their own inspection. Again, I have another guide that is about home inspection specifically. It's a one sheet handout. And on that has 4 or 5 different home inspectors that I've worked with. And so it gives them the information about them, their contact information. It also has a recommended list of questions for them to ask anyone that they hire. But again, most of them are going to hire based on either time, if someone's available at the time they need, or based on price, if they want, the least expensive. And that's their prerogative. We all know, many times you get what you pay for. And so a home inspection to me is not the thing you want to skimp on if you want to make sure that your home is going to be in good condition when you close on it. But yeah, we want to empower them to make those calls and do that, because if we do that order and then something goes wrong, or the home inspector misses something or makes a mistake, who gets blamed? We get blamed. And so even though we do that as a courtesy to the client at times, ultimately, the more that we can put that into their area to take care of, the better for us long term, because you just never know what may happen. And I've had that be a problem. I've had a home inspector miss something and the client blames, me for that. And it's not, I wasn't the one inspecting the home, and I didn't authorize the order for it. I just made the phone call to set it up because they said, can you set this up for Thursday, or can you call them and get that started? Because they're busy at work or doing something else. And so I've learned through the years, it's better if they call and set it up and take responsibility for who they hired. And I will tell you, the home inspector is going to need to collect a credit card for payment, typically up front, before they will confirm that inspection appointment. So they're going to have to talk to the buyer anyway. It just makes sense to have them be in direct communication so they can provide that payment information.
And then for the appraisal, same thing, or they have to call the appraisal, or who call, how
Yeah,
that?
no, they don't, no one, none of us deal with the appraisal directly. In fact, there's rules against that. So the appraisal is ordered through the lender.
Oh,
And the lender actually contacts a middleman. It's called an appraisal management company. The appraisal management company then orders an appraisal through an appraiser. And so that way there's this intermediary that makes sure that the lender and the appraiser aren't talking directly to each other.
oh, good.
It's a federal guideline to protect everybody, to make sure that there's no collusion going on with the appraised value. And
Mhm.
so typically as a listing agent, you'll get a notification from the appraiser when they're ready to schedule the appointment with you. But as a buyer's agent, most of the time we will not know when that appraisal is happening unless the listing agent tells us it's happening.
Mhm.
And so it's something we wait on the lender to verify that it's been ordered and when it comes in.
Good. I'm glad. Good to know all these
Yeah,
details.
yeah. Um, and if, there may be cases where you have a very unique property that you're looking at, potentially, uh, maybe needing to have appraised before you list it because you have a difficult time or challenging time with determining a value.
Mhm.
Sometimes you can refer an appraiser to a seller directly, but those are, I'll say, rare opportunities. Most of the time, we can do a fairly good job at making sure that we um, give the seller direction on here's what we think properties should be priced at.
Mhm.
Okay, so I would encourage you to look through this buyer's guide that we have in the office, get familiar with the pages and understand what we are providing to the buyers, because there are buyers that will not read it, and that's okay. We want to be able to refer back to it and also to make sure that they know that this is valuable to them. It is intended to guide them through the process and answer all of their questions so that, again, it reduces the amount of time we're taking to answer questions that they could have already learned about in here if possible. So it's a wonderful guide that has a lot of great information, and it's very helpful. Again, it minimizes risk. It also helps with how to set expectations and communicate about different parts of the process.
Um,
Um, the last thing is protecting them, and I want to talk about what it looks like to protect a client, and that comes in many different forms. But right off the bat, there are a couple of different ways I want to talk to you about how you protect your client and what does it look like. And so one of those is through the buyer broker agreement. This is a standard of practice for our office, but I also want to share with you this particular acknowledgement that I have and can give to my clients. And again, I'm happy to share this with you. I think it's important that we talk to our clients about why they should hire us exclusively and why we want to be working for people who are willing to work with us exclusively. And there's several reasons. The first reason, and one of the main reasons, is that our code of ethics actually requires that we have representation agreements in writing, and you can see it right here in Article 9. So if our code of ethics, which we are bound to, says we're supposed to represent people in writing, we should do that. We would never take a listing without a listing contract. And yet there are so many agents who will go out and work for a buyer without a buyer's contract. And it just doesn't make sense to me because it's not a good standard of practice. For the sake of the buyer and the sake of us, we need to have a contract that explains what the expectations are when we work together. And so this is a great way to introduce it to a client when you're doing the consultation, just having them acknowledge that there's a code of ethics you are bound to and you're aware of it and that you're following it, because that breeds trust and we want that in the relationship.
okay.
Then when you're done with the consultation and the client decides, yes, they absolutely want to work with you, they feel heard, they felt like you listened to them, they were able to express their needs, and you asked relevant questions to understand their timeline and their communication preferences and those kinds of things. Then you want to move into signing the actual documents for the representation. And there are lots of different documents related to that, but I'm going to hit on three that are important to start with. And in addition to this one that I've shared that explains why we sign a representation. So the first one I mentioned is that buyer broker agreement. And that's the agreement that outlines them hiring our firm to represent them throughout the sale. The benefit to them is that they have a dedicated agent who is bound by fiduciary duties and by by the law to do everything they can to help through that transaction. And if the agent isn't bound to that contract, they've got a lesser standard of care. And so that's a huge benefit to the client. It also sets a timeline for how long are you planning to search. And that's a really great thing to have in writing, because if you have a buyer who really is just a looky-loo kind of buyer, maybe they're on the fence, maybe they're not really being intentional about wanting to buy. It's more of a, if I find something, I'll buy it kind of client. You may want to have a contractual deadline where that relationship ends and you can be released from it as an agent and say, you know what? You've wanted to look at a dozen homes, or you've looked at 34 homes and you still haven't decided to even make an offer. At this point, I think it's best if we part ways. Or maybe not so much even that they wanted to see so many homes, because it may be a legitimate buyer, but they may not have found what they need. But maybe you find that the buyer's just difficult to work with. Maybe they're abusive. Maybe it's not a good fit. And so having that contract end gives you, again, a way to release them back into the marketplace and to say, I'm going to move on to new buyers. So that buyer broker agreement is really great to outline the duties of both the buyer and the agent, and also to set the deadline. And then third, it also obviously outlines commissions that are paid to you, so that if you have a listing that maybe is not offering a fair compensation,
Oh,
you have the ability to get compensation from the buyer to make up for that.
you just made me think about a good question I have for you.
Mhm.
So about the commission, how much is what we supposed to charge?
So you have the ability to charge whatever you think is a fair price for your services. There is no standard in our industry. And I would say I could look at statistics, but I would think on average right now, maybe it's close to 2.3% is probably average. But again, what one party charges someone and what another party charges can be completely different because of the level of service they give, or the amount of time that they're committed to. Or maybe, again, if you're working with a buyer that, for instance, maybe you're working with someone who is an investor doing a 1031 exchange, and there's some additional duties that you have to do for that because you're identifying multiple properties for them. You may charge more for your services. It's really a matter of what you feel comfortable putting into that form. So there's no requirement. I believe our brokerage has a minimum of $500 as far as what you should charge on any given transaction. We obviously encourage you to bill much more because we think you're worth more than that. But we don't dictate what you charge your clients for the services you provide.
But it's in between, you said 2 and 3%, or 2.3?
I said 2.3 is probably about average currently for our marketplace. But again, those averages change in different seasons. When we're in a buyer's market versus a seller's market, it will change drastically.
Okay.
So yeah, we're in a different market right now than we were, 4 years ago. And so those averages for what agents are paid will swing quite a bit.
And it's the same for buyers and for sellers, or?
Same thing. You charge whatever you feel is workable for you. I have 4 different commission plans I offer to my sellers so they can pick from a menu of services and decide what works best for them. And again, those prices may change during different market shifts because there are times where the market becomes more competitive and we might have to be more competitive in our pricing. And there are times where it's a different market where there's not a lot of discounters or cost cutting or other things. And so we may be able to charge more for our services. So that's one component of commissions. That's not the only one. There's a lot of different reasons why commissions may be adjusted. Had a question yesterday from an agent that is representing someone who is family. She wanted to know what she could do to discount for them. And so that kind of stuff comes up. My encouragement to you is that you have something in writing already for your business so that when these situations come up, you can give them that that item in writing and say, this is my policy for how I do business. I have another friend who's a veteran. She gives a discount to all of her veteran clients because to her, that's important. So you can craft your business model however you want. You can serve buyers in, whatever way you deem best, as long as it's done professionally, and you can charge what you feel is fair to the consumer and obviously what someone is willing to pay.
Is can I ask you to help me with that chart, with that, the percent? And because I like to have that on writing, like you said, and
Sure.
ready. In any case somebody asks me, I won't be explaining, but I just kind of show them what is the system and the.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that's something that we can certainly work on together. So again, I go back to when you're in this situation where you've got your buyer broker, the next document that you're going to want to also get is your agency form. That real estate agency disclosure and election, we call it the ready form, is really important because it goes over, again, the fiduciary duties that you owe. It is not a contract, but it is actually referred to in the purchase contract. And so we need to have that form on file for the brokerage because it's already referred to in our other documents. And then the third one that I think is really great to give is the buyer advisory. That is something you can give them at the consultation or immediately after your consultation is done. Because when you give them that, it starts to show them that you're there to help them grow and learn and be prepared to meet the opportunity, but also prepared for anything that may be happening with regards to challenges down the road. And so I would consider giving them that buyer advisory at the same time that you get those other documents signed to help them have some time to read through it. Okay.
It is okay, like if we have a phone call and we got it through can we kind of send these documents before we meet them in person?
Yeah, you can. I wouldn't recommend sending the contract. I doubt most people are going to want to sign a contract before they've ever interviewed with you.
Yeah, okay.
It kind of doesn't make sense. You want to do the consultation first as
Okay.
the way to lead them to understanding what the process looks like, who you are, understanding what their needs are, then agreeing to work together. And then once you have agreement to work together, then you want to send them the contract and the agency form along with that buyer advisory to make sure that they have what they need to move forward in working with you.
Okay.
So it definitely follows a flow that will help if you stick to that order.
Okay.
Okay. The other way you can protect your client is, of course, by writing an appropriate contract that is clear, unambiguous, that outlines all of the terms that they want, because it will allow for the transaction to go forward smoothly without hopefully disagreements or issues that can come up. The more we can do in advance to set that up correctly, the better the outcome will be at the end when we've gone through all of the transactional process. And then the third way you can protect your client is watching those contract timelines and deadlines that are needed to be able to say to your client, hey, we need to order the inspections because we have to have a response back to the seller by this date, or we need to make sure that the lender orders the appraisal, because if they don't, we're not going to be able to get documents to title 3 days before closing as the contract requires. There's a lot of timelines and a lot of contingencies that have to be met. And so part of our protection is to make sure that we not only make sure everybody else is doing their job, but that we're also making sure our client is aware of what steps they have in front of them and that they're doing what they need in a timely manner so that we don't get anything off track or behind.
Okay, so when they get the pre-approval, it's more likely they just got approved and they will get the loan they needed. When they said, "Oh, I got pre-scan or pre-approved,"
Mhm.
that means it's more likely 100% they will get the finance for the.
Yes, so when they get their pre-approval, if the lender has done a good job, which they should, then they will have the ability to move forward with making offers under the assumption that the lender has actually done their due diligence and that they've approved them for a set amount. Um, Things
and
can change. We're in an
and
environment right now where interest rates are changing rapidly by the day. So it's
Mhm.
very possible if a buyer has gotten pre-approved and they're out shopping for a home and they think they can buy up to a certain rate, maybe let's say 500, just for an example. And so they look at $500,000 homes, but then it takes a month to find what they're looking for. And in that month, now interest rates have gone up a 0.5% more. Now maybe they can't afford that payment, or they don't get approved for that payment because their debt to income ratios won't allow that higher house payment. So they're just because they're pre-approved does not necessarily mean that things can't change. I've had many pre-approvals happen and then someone gets laid off, or they end up
Mhm.
being furloughed for a job, or there's a life circumstance that happens, someone's hospitalized or disabled, and lots of different things can change the
Yes.
pre-approval. Even though it may happen on a specific date, it doesn't mean it's guaranteed.
And just I know it is the lenders will use the same percentage, the same, or it's like
Mm-mm.
for every, or they can do whatever they, anybody, I mean, they change the percentage, the rates and the interest.
They can update the rates for sure. And they should over time if the rates have changed quite a bit, because when you present an offer, you don't want to give a pre-qualification form to the listing agent that shows that they're approved at a rate that's no longer valid in today's market. If the rates have changed drastically, they need to update that.
Yeah, my question is, all the lenders have to go by the standard of these certainly points, or the lenders can change their rates?
Yeah, rates are based on the market, just like the stock market. It changes, it fluctuates up and down all day long, every day. Interest rates for loans are the same way. It's just a condition of the market. The lender doesn't set the rate. It's moving. It's a moving target. So at any given time, if the buyer's qualification standards change, or if rates in the market change, you're going to have a different outcome than what they may have quoted initially. So they're providing a quote essentially, and basically we know that the buyer is qualified um, for a certain house purchase amount based
Yeah.
on what we expect the rate to
Because
be given.
the reason I'm asking, I gave this lender, the one lender says 5.5, and my client say just, well, like X, like she already signed with somebody else
Yeah.
because it was more, she say, aggressive, and
Hmm.
anyway, she didn't ask for pre-approval before,
Hmm.
and then she said she got pre-approval with 4.3 percentage. It does, I don't know if that's
Yeah, well, we'll talk about mortgages in the mortgage class because we'll go through a lot of that stuff. For right
okay.
now, I want to talk just through what does it look like to um, guide the buyer through the transaction. And those questions, honestly, most of those questions need to be directed to the lender. And that's why forming your team up front to guide them through this process is so critical. If they're using an online lender that they have no relationship with and they don't know, it's going to be very hard to get a straight answer or to get the information you need to be able to make an informed decision.
Okay.
And we can't we can't guide our client through the process if we don't know what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to trust that the lender has done their job and has done it well.
Okay.
As part of every file that you have, our Arizona Association has done a wonderful job with also providing this form, which is called the critical date list. That form can be filled out by you when you start a new contract. And I think it's very helpful just to know when the due date is for all of these different things that are based in the contract. And
Mhm.
so I would recommend, especially as you're getting started or learning transactions, that you use this as a reference consistently so that you keep on track with making sure you don't miss any of the deadlines and therefore you protect your client. If you fail to give notice through a specific deadline, so for instance, if you fail to cure someone because they haven't provided information in a timely manner, or for instance, you fail to provide information such as the inspection notice, um, or the notice to cancel over the HOA contingency, you may end up obligating your client to a contract they don't want because you failed to give notice in a timely manner. And so knowing and understanding these dates and being able to follow them are really important. So I want to make sure you just know that that is available to you, and it's recommended that it's something you reference. Okay. With that, I want to jump into very quickly as we finish up what it looks like to set up your first search for a buyer. Because again, I feel like this is an important component of getting that consultation right and making sure that you start the home search process off on the right foot. And so I'm going to do a quick screen share and walk you through what it would look like to set up a search for a buyer using some of the tools within our MLS. This is not a full MLS class. That's another class in and of itself. But I feel like it's valuable for me to share what I do to set up a search so that you at least have a basic understanding of what some of the fields and tools may look like that could be helpful to you as you're consulting with your client. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into an MLS search. Hopefully this screen looks very familiar to you. This is what my home screen looks like. Yours may look a little bit different because we each have the ability to customize it. But there should be a search bar over here or a menu where you can get to a quick search. For me, with my quick search, I actually have one set up that I customized so it has the fields I want, and it saves me a lot of time. Every time I go into search, it's got the most common fields that I'm likely to search for. And so initially, I will start with making sure I'm looking at what are the most important components to the house that they're looking to buy. So depending on the buyer, let's say that I had that consultation and I know that they are looking at properties in a specific area. They want a yard for their dog and they want to have at least 3 bedrooms and a home office. Okay, so those would be common fields. I also know that they're qualified up to $575,000. So I'm going to start with plugging in some of the details that they gave me. So we're going to put that maximum at 575. They have explained that they want a single family. I asked them, would they be open to a patio home or a townhome? And they said no. So we're going to just exclude those for now. What I have learned is that sometimes when buyers can't find what they're looking for, this search gets edited and modified down the road. I had that happen just yesterday with someone who was unable to find what they're looking for in the price point, and now they're willing to look at maybe taking off some of the criteria that they initially were searching for. In this particular instance, I'm also going to put down that they want the 3 bedrooms. They did agree they don't need 3 full bathrooms. They would like 2.5 though, so that there is a guest bathroom, but still 2 full bathrooms for the family. And then I'm going to go down here and also add bedrooms plus. And bedrooms plus is an amazing descriptor. And it's done so that you can add extra rooms that may not be a bedroom. And so with that, I'm going to put 4 in here because I know that they want at least 3 bedrooms plus 1 other room, whether it's a 4-bedroom or 3 bedrooms plus a loft, plus a den, plus an office, plus whatever, at least I have that 4th room. And so that is one way that I can customize the search in a way they can't find on other big sites like realtor.com or homes.com or zillow.com. We all know consumers are using those sites, but they do not have the tools we have at our disposal to search for homes appropriately. And so I love that we can do this. We also know that they're on a pretty tight budget. And so if they go all the way up to 575, they cannot afford to have an association fee that's really high. And so
Mhm.
with that, I might actually go in here and type in another search for fees and look at what does it look like to have an HOA fee that is no more than $100 a month.
Okay.
You can put certain parameters in place to make sure that when we get them pre-qualified, we're now not showing them properties that have a $250 a month HOA, which aren't possible for them to do. So there's a great filter that we have in here just to add certain things like that.
Mhm.
Now, the other thing that we know is that, let's say that they work in this area. They've already told me they don't want to be more than 20 minutes from their job for commuting purposes. And
Mhm.
so with that, we have the ability to customize the search area. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. You can see all the green dots are currently the properties that match their search. We
Yes.
have several search options to be able to do that. One of the most common is this radius or the rectangle. Either one of those can work for searching. So for instance, if I know an address, I can plug it in or I can just draw the circle. In this case, I'm just going to draw a circle by clicking and dragging until I'm no more than 7 miles. If they've told me 7 miles is an appropriate space, I can do something like that.
Okay.
Okay. I
Mhm.
can also plug in again an address by using this pin. And once I've used the pin, I can then do a search, a radius search from an address. So if they have a work address, I can use that. So let's use our office as an example. And we'll put this in here. There we go. And let's assume that we're going to use this location. We're now going to create a radius search that is, let's say, 5 miles.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, what you'll see when we zoom out is I've got another circle.
Okay.
One of the things that I can do in this search, if I go back up to this, is I can also change this to only properties that intersect these two circles. So if you have a home address and a work address, or maybe two business addresses, and you need homes that primarily are in the radius of both parties, you can do something like that and find only the properties that are inside the two circles.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, I'll change this back to within. And then the other thing I will show you is we can also use overlays and draw on the map. So let's say, for instance, someone gives me a zip code that they want. I often find that people want a zip code not because of the actual zip code, but because they think of where they think they know where it is.
Mhm.
And so, for instance, as I'm overlaying, you can see this zip code is very oddly shaped, correct? If we were
Uh,
to look for this zip code, what we might find is that something that's right in this corner is only a block from the zip code, but probably still acceptable to them and not in that zip code. So I very often will ask, can you give me boundaries for streets or for location? Or again, commute times or radius searches so that we are working with, again, the geographic location they want rather than a specific zip code. Sometimes they're looking for a school boundary, in which case I would go into this search. I would go down here to the schools and I would add the school, the elementary school, middle school, or high school, and find all the homes within that school boundary.
mhm.
These are things that we can do. So if we're using the square, for instance, I might take this zip code and go to the furthest boundary of each part of that zip code just to see what is in there. Because again, I think for most clients, they don't understand where all those boundaries are specifically. And that's part of that consultation is asking those questions to you. Is there a specific reason you want that zip code? Or are you willing to look maybe a couple blocks outside of that zip code parameter just to see what else might be available?
Mhm.
Sometimes that will depend on how many results come up. So for instance, in this one, we only have 6, so they may not want to limit it to just one zip code. You can also overlay certain neighborhoods. So for instance, let's say that they want a specific neighborhood, um, we can go in and look at specific areas or neighborhoods that we want to see, and then we can use that to search. So they may love this neighborhood. I can then zoom in and actually draw a map around this neighborhood using this tool. So this tool will allow me to set specific boundaries like this
Mm.
and actually draw right around the area that this neighborhood offers.
Oh, wow.
See how that works?
Yeah, I didn't
So
know
if someone
that.
says, I want to be in this neighborhood, maybe their mother-in-law lives in the neighborhood and they need to be close by, or maybe their best friend lives in the neighborhood or something, or they just love that particular neighborhood. You can
Okay.
hand draw a map around that neighborhood and find only the properties in that area. Okay. So I'm going to take off the subdivision and neighborhoods now, just so that you can start to see. I'm going to go back and delete some of my circles because now we've got several overlays that we don't need. We certainly don't need the rectangle that's just within the circle, and we don't really need the neighborhood either. But this is a way you can, again, customize your search and help your buyers to find exactly what they want.
Okay.
Okay. Once you're done with that, you have the ability to look through the listings and you can recommend any that you want. You can also save this and then set up a subscription, and the subscription will notify the client of any new listings that now match this criteria. And so that's the benefit to them being involved in this system, is that when they are connected directly to our multiple listing service, it's in real time and there's no delay. So they have the most up-to-date information. Everything else syndicates data from our system. So once it leaves our system, depending on how long it takes to sync, the client may be looking at outdated data.
See that part, right? I did understood everything, but when you say save,
Mhm.
and I had a lot of I've been trying to practice on my search.
Mhm.
When I get to save, and I even try to email it to my sister just to practice.
Mhm.
So I got some trouble doing that.
Okay.
Mm.
So the search is whatever you want it to be. I generally will name it as, Sally Sue's home search or something like that, or condo search, or John Doe's, investment property search under 300, something like that, to give it a name so that they can see the name of the search. And the reason that becomes important is because when they log into their system, you don't want it just to be their name, because if it's just their name, they don't realize it's a clickable link. And so I name the search as something that gives a little bit of a description. You can also add more details in here, but then the next piece is just to put the name in here. So this is where, it might be John Doe, and we put, whatever it is, john1@gmail.com. Then we now have the ability to create the portal, invite the customer to the portal. And when we
Okay.
save and add the subscription is what tells the system how often they want to receive an email. So in this particular case, because that email won't work, I'll put my own email in here as a way to test this and show you. So now we do save. Once we save, it takes me to a new screen to add the subscription. And this is where I can say, I want them to get notified 3 days a week on properties that come on the market,
Oh,
right?
perfect.
Or I want them to be notified the moment something hits the market. So I'm going to change it to ASAP, and they'll get a ping, even if it means that there's 4 of them that come on the market in the same day. They'll get notified every time something comes on the market. And then I can customize the message and click save. And the moment I do, now that search, the portal, the invitation is sent, and the subscription is scheduled.
Okay, so then you say save.
Yep. And all of it is done. So now we've added the client, we've created the portal, we've set the timelines for when they're notified, and we've created the subscription to notify them of new listings.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I learned something.
So that's how you save a search and create a client, and then you have them set up to get notifications.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions that you have on this initial walkthrough of kind of the basics, the bare minimums of what does it look like to work with your first buyer?
Basis. Well, now you said I can have these forms.
Yes.
I like to have them just so I can read them and go through, and I practice my speech when I get my first customer.
Yes.
And I hopefully with practice I get there.
Yeah. And we'll have another class on scripts and dialogues that you can use. I'm a big proponent of being prepared. I think preparation meets
Yes.
success.
Uh-huh.
But I also know that I don't want you to be so stuck on memorizing how to say something that you lose the heart of it or stop listening to the client. At some point, it's just as important that you're authentic and showing up for them and offering to serve and just seeking to understand where they are, what they're looking for, and what they need. Then you can move into professional dialogues. But under this initial umbrella of meeting with a buyer the first time, doing the consultation, and then guiding them through the process, I think, the less scripted it sounds, the better it will be.
I've been thinking on going through, and I'm a little nervous and shy and all that stuff. It is, I don't know how that a client will feel if I said, "Oh, I'm very new. I have no experience." Probably they don't even want to work with me. But I want to be honest. Because if they're gonna
Sure.
ask, oh, have you have any experience, or
Yeah.
I don't want to say, oh yeah, and I don't.
Right.
Uh,
No, you never want to lie, but I do want to change your mindset and not have you make an assumption that's the negative of what they're thinking when you say
uh-huh.
that.
Okay.
You don't know what they're thinking, and they may not care at all. They may just be curious. So don't assume that they're discounting you or not wanting to work with you simply because you're new to the industry. Have the belief that you have something valuable to offer. And one of the scripts that I have often used with newer agents is to talk about what you can offer, because if you can flip that and provide value to them, they will automatically want more of what you have to give. So, for instance, if someone asks you how much experience you have, you can say, I'm new to the industry, but, and here's where you add the value. I have a team of professionals behind me with over 100 years of experience that are a phone call away. So I promise you, you're going to be taken care of with excellence. Or
Good.
I'm new to the industry, but what that means to you is I have a lot of availability and I'm enthusiastic and ready to work for you. And so they're getting someone who may be new, but who has something of value to offer, as opposed to someone who may be experienced and so overwhelmed and busy with their own clients that they don't have the same amount of time and energy to give to that client.
Mhm.
Right. So
Yeah.
share what you can give. Don't discount what you don't have to offer.
Okay, good. That's a good tip, because I see I have to get out of shell sometime,
Yeah.
and
Well, and we have to work on our own mentality. We really do. We have to work on believing in what we have to offer and showing that confidence rather than us discounting who we are and what we have to give, which then makes the client wonder if they've chosen the right person to work with. Because if you don't believe in you, why should they believe in you?
yes,
So
you're
you
right.
have to believe you have something of value, and you do. You have a lot of experience that you've brought to the table through construction and
Mm-hmm.
remodeling and other things that you've worked, the industry that you've worked in before, that brings in expertise that most agents don't have a background in. And
Yeah.
so you have something unique and special to offer. And because you aren't overwhelmed with clients at this point, you have the energy and the time to give them the attention they deserve. And so if you can communicate what you are able to offer, I think you'll find that they'll be very excited about that.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah,
You're
it's a good
welcome.
input. Yeah.
Any other questions before we finish
No,
up? We're at our
mm,
hour.
no, I'm good, and I appreciate your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to teach me those
Yeah.
step by step, because I really need them.
Well, I appreciate you showing up for this class. I will, of course, get this in Hannah's hands and we will get this uploaded so you will have access to it if you need to go back and review it. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much,
You're
Christy.